Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to welcome you and thank you for coming out to Houston Public Library at the central location. I'm Donnie Bird. I am the Senior Manager for Adult and Multicultural Programs, and we are celebrating Pride Month. And a big part of our celebration, we have a very nice treat in store for you. We have legendary author, Mr. J.D. Doyle. He'll be here to present a presentation and a reading on his book, 1981. So before I go any further, let me go ahead and read a brief bio, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. J.D. Doyle. I will let you know in advance there will be time for questions and answers, so just kind of think about what you want to ask during the presentation, and we will allow time for both in person as well as online. So just to go on with the brief introduction, J.D. Doyle is an American LGBT music history archivist and radio producer. In addition to his engineering job, he did volunteer work as the editor of Our Own Community Press, a gay newspaper based out of Norfolk, Virginia. In 1981, Doyle moved to Houston, Texas, where he later produced the radio programs Queer Music Heritage on the station KPFT and Out Radio, heard on the internet. His currently active works include the Texas Obituary Project and the Houston LGBT History website, all part of his 501c3 nonprofit, the J.D. Doyle Archives. Ladies and gentlemen, here it is, Mr. J.D. Doyle in conversation, or in presentation rather, with his book, 1981, My Gay American Road Trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Nice introduction. Nice to see some folks here I know. That's great. This is the first time I've done this talk with a slideshow. I hope this will amplify what I'm talking about. In some cases, I think it will make it more amusing, because you'll see. Glasses. And the structure of the book is kind of like, well, today I'm going to talk about the Houston's chapter. On my trip across the country, I stopped in Houston. That's the chapter I'm going to read today and talk about mostly, because that's what you always know about. But the book didn't start in Houston. It started with my life. And I kind of wrote an introduction, like 22 pages introduction of getting me from being a kid to being a high school kid to being a college kid to graduating as an engineer, moving to Rochester, working for Kodak, and then finally moving to Norfolk, where I came out of the closet. So the main chapter I'm reading is Houston, and before we get started in that, I want to read a very short paragraph talking about that part of my life. That whole first chapter is called Pre-Norfolk, and I did that for a reason. I want to make a comment that this chapter, being named Pre-Norfolk, marks a huge change in my life, as if everything was either before or after coming out. I think it goes even further beyond that. I was not myself until I was out and interacting with other gay and lesbian people. Not being yourself impacts your social and emotional growth as a person, delaying it many years, at least in my case. I was not fully comfortable as a teen or college kid because I did not know how to act in ways that society considered normal. Those years where we were supposed to grow, we were hiding in the closet. Okay. In 1981, I was living in Norfolk. I had just moved from Rochester. I had come out of the closet like gangbusters in the fall of 1978. I moved for a different job, and a week later, bam, I was out. I contacted a gay organization and got involved with them right away. Mostly involved with the gay newspaper, which I found I loved. And working on that paper, after about a year, the current editor resigned, and oh gosh, who's going to do this? And I wasn't certainly looking for a job like that. These are all volunteer work. But I was persuaded, yes, you could do this, and I kind of could, but I wasn't looking for it. So I became editor in the fall of '79. And next slide, please. Pause there. those are the 4 websites I've developed over the last 25 years. So they kind of encapsulate what I've been working on. First, I did the Queer Music Heritage Project on KPFT radio for 15 years, from 2000 until 2015. Then I decided I needed to move on to something different. I started the Houston LGBT History website, and at the same time, because I have to keep shoving stuff on my plate, the Texas Obituary Project, which captures all of the gay obituaries from LGBT Texans that I could find, mostly from our magazines, from other sources, mostly from the magazine This Week in Texas. There's 8,100 obituaries right now. They keep growing, and I'm kind of pleased that I've been able to make a searchable database to capture this data. Next, please. Okay, now we're still in Norfolk, and I'm in my first month as editor of the gay newspaper. The newspaper was called Our Own Community Press. And a bunch of us went to the march. The larger picture of me, kind of looking kind of, I don't know, smug, I don't know. But that was one of the photos that was used on a collage page in the newspaper. And I call that my coming out photo. None of us were named in the newspaper because, remember, this was 1979. We could easily lose our jobs if people at work didn't like it. That can still happen. But, and the other photo, you could pick me out in the lower right. That's at a rally the night before the march. And I could be seen in front in that one. And curiously, I found out about that photo only about 10 years ago. I was going through an archive here in Houston, looking for photos to use in the banner project. And I was stunned to see myself, and quickly arranged to borrow the negative. And it was taken by a Houston photographer, Larry Butler, who died of AIDS in 2003. Remember, I was still living in Norfolk in '79. What were the odds of a Houston photographer and then me learning about it 35 years later? And back to 81. After a year or so in Norfolk, the chemical company I worked on laid off about a third of its employees, including me. I sold my townhouse, moved in with some friends, and I had 2 things you rarely have in life: time and money. Talking to my dad in Ohio on the phone, he suggested I take a cross-country trip, and further, that I keep a journal. Thinking back, this was really surprising, because I did not ever remember ever seeing him read a book. But that's just what I did. Let's go to the next slide, please. There we go. That turned out to be the route of my trip, the trip I took. And I started in Virginia, went through North Carolina to Atlanta, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, where I went to a lesbian and gay conference. Southeastern Lesbian and Gay Conference was held there that year. 2 years before, I'd gone to the same conference in a different city in Chapel Hill. So at all these events, I was writing articles for the newspaper to send back through the mail for them to publish in the newspaper. So I would still consider myself part of the staff of Our Own Community Press. From Baton Rouge, I went to Houston, where I spent a number of weeks, and then to Dallas, where I went to the Gay Press Association conference, which was the second conference they had. It was kind of still an organizing conference. So in a way, I guess I was a founding member of the Gay Press Association, because I joined at that conference. I don't want to get too far into the trip, because that goes too far off track. But so let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Now I start the reading. And this reading starts about 2 weeks into the trip. I'd already been, as I said, to Chapel Hill, Atlanta, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Monday, April 13th. The drive to Houston took 5 hours, and I checked into the Plaza Hotel on Montrose upon arriving. It was expensive, so I arranged to spend the rest of the week at the Houston Guest House on Avondale. I had dinner at Baja Sam's, a nice gay bar and restaurant, Classy, but not overdone. Tuesday, drove around Montrose yesterday morning, mostly stopping at record stores. Montrose has a gay ghetto atmosphere you can sense. There were at least 15 bars within walking distance of the guest house, and many others not much further. Of course, not all of these bars you would want to go to. For example, Midnight Sun is a hustler bar. Hustling is very common in this neighborhood. Even I figured out immediately what those young guys were doing, loitering on those street corners. And we are at slide 5. Let's go. Okay, so far I like the Houston guest house. It's convenient and the atmosphere is pleasant. If you stay at least a week, you get a rate reduction from $30 to $25 per night. In 1981, a dollar was worth $3.50, and it's worth now $3.50. So it was not as cheap as it sounds like it was. I'm in the red room. Next slide, please. That's at the front of the building. One more. I'm in the red room, which is aptly named as everything, walls, rug, woodwork, is in the red color palette. I understand there were rooms with other themes, like leather themes, and so forth. In Waldenstein, next slide, please, is the legit gay bookstore. It's about 3 blocks away, and it appears there are also a few interesting shops nearby. That makes it appear that Waldenstein is the whole building. It's not. That's more of an arcade with other shops inside. I don't remember what the other shops were, perhaps selling candles, who knows what. But that was the main storefront business for Waldenstein at that location. Later, I had dinner a few blocks away at the Godfather on Westheimer. The food was excellent. Though I tended to tip the piano player to stop playing. He was ruining so many songs I like. The Godfather became La Strada, which became El Tiempo. Doing better now. After that, I walked down to Disco Kroger, and I've got that in quotes, for some food and for tomorrow's breakfast. They usually play disco music, and of course, there were lots of queers there. And I think back, that's actually how I phrased it in the journal. I was, I guess, self-identifying at that time as queer and not thinking negative of that. And that it took a long time for us to get to that point these days. Later, I walked to the Montrose Mining Company, which is now Pastino's. Next slide. Great. It's a country western bar. It also has the first Levi's bar I've seen that had a DJ. Had a decent crowd for a Monday night. I would not have wanted it any more crowded. I would rate that crowd at about a 5, but there was one very hot man I liked there named Norman, who works as an orthopedic technician at the medical center. What a wild night. Just about the best sex I've ever had. And he said about the same thing. We have a date for tonight. That photo, not in the book, so you're the only one seeing this. Later, it looks like I'm here at the guest house for 2 more weeks. Stuart McLeod, the manager, offered me a rate of $20 per night, and if I stay that long. It seems he is going out of town for a few days, so it's worth it to him to know somebody reliable and that the room is booked. I guess he feels the place will fall apart when he's gone, so he wants to tie things down as much as he can. While he's gone, a friend of his, Charles Gillis, will be minding the store. Charles, who I met at the Baton Rouge conference, owns the Wildenstein bookstore. Last night, Norman and I had dinner at a very gay restaurant called Baba Yaga. That name sounds familiar. Of course, this was 18 fires ago. And then we went bar hopping. First to the Wildwood Saloon, home of the Sundance Saddle Club, obviously a Western bar. It had a nice back patio, and almost all the bars here have patios. I love that. It's a chance to get away from the smoke and noise, and the atmosphere on the patio was more laid back. I'm going to insert that it wasn't until 2006 that it became against the law to smoke in a bar. Yay. But this was 1981, a long time ago. Next on to the Galleon, which was nice. It's not quite a Western bar, but there seemed to be at least a Western element everywhere. Finally, to the Brazos River Bottom, definitely a country western bar. There is country music on the jukebox, such as You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man by Loretta Lynn, and sometimes a live band. Most of the customers dress kind of western, cowboy hats, boots, t-shirts, Levi's. Cowboy hats on guys in Houston are common enough that after a while, you didn't even notice them. Later this afternoon, I took a long walk from the guest house out to Westheimer, which is the main commercial drag in Montrose. I walked for a number of blocks. There are several interesting, trendy type shops, gift shops, galleries, card shops, clothing, and many restaurants. While I was walking, a kid in a pickup truck stopped and asked me where the bar Montrose Mining Company is. I guess it looked like I would know, and I did. Further down the street, I walked by an older man using a payphone. As I passed him, he blew me a kiss. Of course, he was not good looking to me, such is life. Aside, when do you remember a payphone on Westheimer? During my walk, I stopped at two more bars. They're everywhere in the neighborhood. First was Mary's. Slide. Okay, great. Mary's is an institution, but I was not impressed. First was Mary's, which I gather is an institution in the area, and I had heard it was a dive. There was a German Shepherd named Sam walking around inside, playing with a plastic trash can lid. The patio was okay, but the bar was dirty and seedy. It's a block from the intersection of Westheimer and Montrose Boulevard. Next bar I went to was Dirty Sally's, which was a block from the guest house on Avondale. Avondale is a residential street with many fine homes. Now, if you imagine one of the houses converted into a bar, you have Dirty Sally's. It and others have a high wood fence around the property, starting with the inside edge of the sidewalk. So the front and backyards are therefore enclosed patio areas. It's quite nice. The whole first floor of the house is the bar with smaller rooms used for lounges, a DJ, pinball machine. And Houston is the first place I've seen bars with a live DJ, but no dance floor. Dirty Sally's had a fair-sized crowd considering it was 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night. I need to swallow. Thursday, April 16th. This afternoon I visited the TWT, This Week in Texas offices. Slide. Pause. That's the second slide from Mary's. Had a very different look from some of the bars. On from there, and we're This Week in Texas publication. I visited their offices, or I should say suite of offices, very modern and impressive. They employ about 20 people, but that may also include other parts of their business. They are owned by Montrose Ventures, which also sells poppers and lube. They have all the modern newspaper equipment, and from what I saw, a very cute staff. I talked to Chuck Patrick, the editor, but only for about 15 minutes. Even though this was supposedly a slow day, people were very busy. TWIT, as everyone calls it, has a weekly bar mag type format. It's statewide, has a decent balance, about 60% ads, and mostly Texas news by design, with some nationwide news. Overall, it's a very good publication, with sections for sports, reviews, comments, humor, and serious articles. After I left the TWIT office, which is about 3 blocks from the guest house, I had picked a damn good location for that guest house. I went afternoon bar shopping to Mary's, the Montrose Mining Company, the Barn, and Dirty Sally's. The only one I had not been to was the Bar, a Western bar which, as I had heard, had an older crowd. And that bar evolved over the years into several bars, including Pacific Street, Miss Kitty's Dance Hall and Saloon, and, unfortunately, Blur. I went to Babylon last night. It's Friday. I went to Babylon last night. Disco by the Thing, that is. And it was amazing. It has a huge dance floor with a very large raised stage. Next slide. Oh, there, you got it. Okay. Very large raised stage off to one corner. The decor is sort of a high-tech with lots of mirrors, electric lights, CO2 jets. The music was good, and especially the new DiscoNet records. DiscoNet is a custom service for DJs only, and often featuring remixes of recent hits. But one that especially grabbed me was the disco version of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. which was really good. I didn't know the artist's name then, but the DJ told me it would be released in 3 to 4 months. Remember, you heard that here. I later found out the name was the Boys Town Gang, led by female vocalist Cynthia Manley. The crowd was a little light as it was a Thursday night, and I guess the same number of people placed in a medium-sized bar would make it very crowded. This place is big. There were only 2 guys that I thought were especially good looking. One was Steve, a very cute bartender. The other, whom I took home, was John, my first tourist of this trip. He and his roommate were driving across country from LA to New York City to move there. He was very knowledgeable about disco and told me his favorite record stores in LA. He's also a terrific cuddler. Excuse me. Some of the popular songs, as in other cities, were It Feels Like I'm in Love by Kelly Marie, It's Not What You Got, It's How You Use It by Carrie Lucas, and On, Lay Your Love on Me by ABBA. Time for a culture comment. Much more so than Atlanta and New Orleans, if you're gay, you wear button fly jeans with the bottom button left open. And I kind of like that. I want to comment that the December before my trip, I was in New York City, and a friend of mine there had told me about this trend. And so I was kind of in the back of my mind looking for examples and looking to see how far it spread across the country. So I talked to people in other cities. Hey, I see you're wearing button-down jeans with your button open. Is this a trend here? And it was everywhere. I remember one guy in Atlanta, kind of nice-looking guy, but I wasn't going up to him to cruise, I thought. But so we started talking, and I asked him, does that button mean what does it mean? He said, oh, it means you're available. And I am. And he was. So that worked out. Back to the reading. I don't think I've ever been cruised so much in the bars, on the streets, especially in the shops and restaurants. People speak to you on the streets, especially in Montrose. And it's pretty much assumed you are gay, which is fine with me. I do realize that in most gay communities, they recognize when somebody is from out of town, as this is fresh meat. Next slide. Great. At this time, I met a few people and was running around the town, and they were showing me things. One of them showed me Herman Park, where I was kind of doing what I shouldn't have been doing on a statue, but it's too late now. Then last night, I went to the Venture Inn, a cruise bar closer to downtown. It was not what I expected at all. Next slide, you got it. It was on the main street, and I expected it slightly sleazy, dark, and dirty. Wrong. It was very high tech. I liked it. There was a mezzanine on both sides you could stand on and look down at the first level. Also, it had a pool table, pinball machines, disco lights, and glitter balls hanging from the ceiling. Another interesting feature of the Venture Inn is found in one of the restrooms. Instead of a row of urinals, there was about a 5-foot-long trough for those needing to pee. There's room for about 3 guys to stand in front of it, and if you do that, you're kind of shoulder to shoulder at this point. Above the trough is a chrome panel about 2 feet high, polished like a mirror, so that those who want to see the details of who else is peeing from the neck down can. And they can do so without their faces giving away where they are looking. It's kind of an exhibitionist or a voyeuristic aspect, and I kind of liked it. I want to insert another thing. I don't know why I didn't write this in my journal, but the Venture Inn had a second bathroom I just didn't mention. It was smaller, darker, and the urinals, there were only 2, were set up differently. They were on a corner, so they were set up like this. So the person standing at this urinal wouldn't have to look very hard to see the person standing at this urinal from that angle. And whatever they were doing, I don't know. It was interesting. Onto the bar's second level. I started a conversation with a guy named Kelly from Dallas, who later told me that he had noticed me when I came in and had discreetly followed me upstairs so he could meet me. Isn't it amazing how these things work out? Well, he's a very nice guy. He's very interesting. He's a gay Mormon, my first, and also a very good friend with Leonard Matlovich. He told me Matlovich used his settlement money to buy a pizza parlor in Russian River, north of San Francisco. Posey asked, how many people here know who Leonard Matlovich is? So, something. So I put a footnote in the book to describe this. Matlovich is the Air Force sergeant and Vietnam War vet who in 1975 came out and was drummed out of the service. He fought the band, and he was a gay hero. He was on the cover of Time magazine, and a movie was made about him. He'll show up later in the book. He didn't completely win the battle with the Air Force because he was drummed out, but they did make a settlement with him due to some technical thing that was going on. So he won a partial victory. Kelly, back to Kelly, who had scoped me out. He just broke up with his lover of 2.5 years about 2 weeks ago. So it was a completely closed relationship. So I'm the first person he's been with since. He's cute and very sweet and almost too nice. I think he might be the type to become easily attached to someone they like. That makes me a little wary, but I did promise I would visit him in Dallas. That's Kelly on the right, and of course that's Leonard Matlovich with his Time magazine cover. This afternoon I had Easter lunch at Steak and Eggs on Montrose Boulevard. Based on the customers, they can have my business anytime. Then, walking back, I happened upon the annual Easter Sleeves Bonnet Contest. You got it. This was where guys in drag, heels, and outrageous bonnets dress up. Judging is held at 5 or 6 different bars during the afternoon, and the whole motley crew travels from bar to bar, by foot, on heels, and it's not close enough they do by pickup truck. They stop by most of the cruise bars I've mentioned so far. This time, I happen to have my camera, but almost only coincidentally. I knew the contest was going on, but I figured it would be too hard to catch which particular bar would win. I went out to take pictures of Westheimer Avenue and stumbled upon the procession. Around 20 contestants and their entourage walking from Montrose Mining Company to the midnight sun. They got the idea somehow that I was an official photographer taking pictures, and so they posed and they camped and they camped and they camped, and I got some great, maybe tasteless shots. We're up to Monday. This afternoon I visited. Next please. This afternoon I visited the radio station that airs the gay programs here at Houston. Station KPFT 90.1 FM. Just rolls off my tongue. The gay show is normally broadcast on Thursday nights, but they were having a special all-day program as a fundraiser. They had an open house at the studio, which is just 3 or 4 blocks from the guest house. Ray Hill is the station manager and is also known as the father of Houston's gay movement. I did not really talk much to him because he was very busy, because I watched him in the studio give a part of the broadcast. He is very articulate. To hear him talk on the air, you would swear he had the copy written in front of him, and yet he did not. It was all him. Addenda. Later, I did get to talk to Ray Hill for about an hour when he saw me at a nearby restaurant and just sat down at my table. He is very interesting. I told him he should write a book on his experiences. Talking with him is a little like interviewing him, except that he is doing all the talking. If you know him at all, you know how true that is. Okay, that is the end of the reading. I'm going to do a little recap. I went to 27 states, 180 gay bars. The book has 140 images and photos, and I had 43 encounters during the trip. And the book includes an unexpected love story. One more slide. Okay, I couldn't help but comment on the music I heard during the trip, because I love music. So I was commenting what songs were new to me, what songs did pack the floor. And so I commented on these songs, and since I had them all written down in the book, I created a Spotify playlist so people could hear it. So 3 hours of the music I loved during the trip. I think I'm the first book author to do that. others, no, to accompany a book. A couple others have done it since. I think I'm the first. And one more slide. Okay, I want to talk about the cover. I love the cover. That picture on the left was taken in Los Angeles. A guy I was running around with took me to Holly Hill House, which Frank Lloyd Wright, that's his house. And so it's a beautiful ground. So we took photos, and I love that photo, the best of the ones I took. When I was getting the book ready, I asked one of our local artists, Scott Swoblin, to do a drawing from the photo. Scott has done the drawings for the eagle upstairs and the posters. And I think he did a great job. I gave it to my publisher. He said, this is great, but let's trim it just above the mustache to give it an air of mystery, which I liked that. That was pretty cool. So that worked out well. You notice that day, my bottom button was unbuttoned, and that's my top button was too. I was very available that weekend. So, okay, how did this become a book? Remember, this was a journal. I wasn't writing it for anybody. I was just putting down my thoughts, things I was learning, things I was growing with, and I never expected anybody to read it, much less put it out into the world. But that changed. I put it away for about 35 years. And then during this time, I kind of became an amateur historian. And I was caring more and more about history as an entity, especially queer history as an entity. And so it became more important to me, gee, you should get this history out the door. You should share it. No one had really done it quite in the manner you did. So I kind of felt the pressure to do that. I also felt a constraint that, no, I'm not going to edit this. You don't edit history. So whatever I talked about, whether it was embarrassing or not, it's in the book. It happened. And so it just was part of the story. In around 2018, I got one of my millennial friends, Barrett White, to transcribe the book. I wasn't going to do that. I'd written it longhand in a notepad, pages and pages and pages, so he transcribed it, I paid him. And we started off that journey. One of my friends, who's in the audience, managed to get a proofreader from Rice University to do editing, which was terrific. This was a chance to get a grad student with a different background and certainly different age to see, does this book make sense? Am I understanding what is the intent of this page or paragraph? He did a great job and helped get the editing done. Of course, there was a lot of editing. There always is. You find things you think, I've read this page 12 times. Oh, there's a missing word. So that always happens. But it took 5 years to get the book out the door. Brian was a lot of help in that. It came out last July 1st. And there's an ebook. Not that anybody would know it though, because Amazon hasn't loaded it to my page of their site. And it's not like, Mr. Amazon, I want you to work on this. You can't talk to anybody there. Barnes & Noble has it on their site for like 3 months, but not Amazon. So I've not sold hardly any ebooks. I'd like to. It costs me money to do the ebook. But I want to mention, I think, one thing more. I've got bookmarks, special bookmarks for the book, which people enjoy. That was my idea, but the publisher made it work. And that's been fun. There are bookmarks on the table in the front, and my cards are on the table in the front, with my websites on the back. Please enjoy those. Q&A. Thank you.
have questions, you can go up to the mic.
Please have questions. They're more fun if you have questions.
Or if you can't make it to the mic, I can take a mic to you.
Thank you. That was a lot of memory. Because I did not take pictures or keep a journal. You mentioned KPFT, which was a really important
Part of my life.
yeah, I think everybody's, especially then with Ray and Jim. Do you remember Jim Carper?
Absolutely.
And Hitachi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carper helped get me on the radio. I was a guest on his Saturday night show. Well, to back that up a little bit, he was playing a little bit of queer music, but I didn't think enough, because these artists did not have anywhere to get heard, and I didn't like that. So I would call him every week, you need to play more queer artists. You need to play more gay lesbian artists. Finally, he said, why don't you come on and play some? Oh, okay. Hadn't thought about that angle, but Jimmy was a wonderful host, and he made you feel at home and loved when you were on the air with him. So it was terrific. We did a couple shows like that. Jack Walensky of Queer Voices heard me and offered me a segment on the Queer Voices show, which I did for 15 years. So I loved it, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I think the only gay music that I remember was it was a record called, it was country western. What was the name of it?
He's not gonna help you.
Oh, he doesn't remember, that's right.
Was it by Lavender Country?
Lavender Country was yes, Lavender Country. Of course, later there was, they called them the Gay Simon and Garfunkel.
Romanowski and Phillips.
Romanowski and Phillips.
Romanowski and Phillips.
They were wonderful.
And
I interviewed both those people.
yeah. Who else?
Well, there was Doug Stevens in the Out Band, did country, very good job. I did 15 years of shows honoring independent artists, the ones that never got heard on the radio. Which
There was Chris Williams and
yeah,
Holly here.
I love the women's music. I gave a lot of attention to them. They made me an honorary lesbian.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I loved saving, in my mind, saving the music of the independent artists. And yes, George Michael could get played, Katie Lang, Elton John, they could get played, but not many more than that. So the people that are trying to do it on their own, trying to crank out their own cassette tapes, remember cassette tapes? There was a window of time, like 88 to 93, where before CDs, and vinyl was still around, but you couldn't afford to do vinyl if you were an independent artist. So they did cassettes, and I did several shows that were based on cassette-only music. You can't get it anywhere else. And I loved honoring that segment. Anyone know? Yes.
So for someone taking this trip in today's time, like if they wanted to do a similar trip like you did, what do you think that they would encounter that would be very, very different from what you experienced on your road trip?
It would be very easier. I did not have cell phones. I did not have the internet. I was kind of working it out for myself. I did have contact with newspaper offices. I mentioned that in Dallas, I went to the newspaper Gay Press Association. That helped me network with newspaper offices across the country, which was valuable for me because I was assertive enough where I would go to Tucson, call up the Arizona Gay News and say, hey, I'd love to see your offices. And they would tell me what was going on in that city and what bars to go to, what bars not. Oh, that bar's closed. And like in San Diego, I was told, oh, JD, there's a gay play Friday night, you may be able to get a ticket. I did, but that's because I knew about it, because I was able to learn what was going on. I got to see Vito Russo give his presentation on Celluloid Closet, if any of you have heard of him. That was a gift to be able to be at the right time in San Francisco to see that at Castro Theater. I met Armistead Maupin 2 or 3 times doing book talks in various parts of the country. Of course, I met Leonard Matlovich. Didn't tell you about that, but it's in the book. So I'm drifting away from your question. How would you do it today? You would have the internet. You would be able to look up where the things were. You'd be able to network with, okay, I want to visit Seattle. You could contact the people in Seattle and kind of make your way ahead of time. You would do it a lot easier than I did. Yes. Mark, Tom?
Okay. What made you choose Houston to live in?
Okay, good question. When I started my trip, I was not really thinking of moving, but maybe in the back of my mind I was. So I was in the lookout for some place to move to, and my criteria was an organized gay community in the South. I had lived in Rochester. I was not going to do with cold anymore. I hated it. That's why I moved from Rochester to Norfolk. So when you think about organized gay community in the South, where does that leave you? Okay, Atlanta, yes, it's an island, a cultural island. San Francisco, expensive. LA, massive. Dallas, might have been okay. But I met so many friendly people in Houston, and I was in Houston, 6 weeks, and I was in Houston twice. I fell in love in Houston, and that's in the next chapter of the book. And I met a guy, and we just hooked up amazingly well. I think at one point, we saw each other 12 days in a row. So we were smitten. But he knew I was continuing my trip. So coming back from California, back this direction, he flew up to Denver to meet me, and we drove back to Kansas, Oklahoma, all that, and then south to Houston. So I had another spiel in Houston of several weeks. And by that time, I was in emotional turmoil. Was this relationship going to work out? And he didn't want to put pressure on me. He didn't want to commit himself either, because it was scary for him too. So kind of decided, yes, I want to move. And I've met so many people, both through running around with him and going to the bowling league and just interacting with him. I decided this was the place. We already had a gay political caucus from 1975. It was organized. There were lots of gay bars I was already familiar with. Good place.
Are you working on any upcoming projects?
I hate that question. I kept a journal for that one trip. That's the only journal I kept in my life. And so no, there's not a 1982 in the works. I don't have any material for that. I didn't keep notes. I'm not working on any trip follow-up. God, that'd be a massive piece of work. And I'll tell you, putting a book out is hard. It is really hard. There's so much work, things that I'm still learning, things that you didn't dream was things you had to think about, or how hard it was. It took a year to get a publisher, to find one, with lots of rejections, lots of no replies at all. And so that I got this far with a publisher in Philadelphia who did a beautiful job assembling the book. He did so good. If you page through the book, there's copies on the table to look through, there's photographs all the way through the book. 140 images that evoke the trip. So it's partially a history book, in a way, of the culture around the country. So you can look at an ad for, my favorite example is, I talk about Jules Tavern in New Orleans for 2 sentences. But then I have an ad for Jules Tavern. Oh, you went to Jules Tavern. And it's really gritty. So you get much more out of the flavor images give to the story. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud it covers that history, my own story. I think it may got too deep into the love story part, but I don't edit history. It's what it is.
Any online questions? Okay.
Oh, so, yeah.
So before I end this talk, there was a lot more that I could have mentioned about Mr. JD. He had a pretty lengthy introduction or a biography, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. So I'll just go ahead and finish reading that. So as I mentioned, he is an American LGBT music and history archivist. So, and those archives also contain one of the largest collections of queer music in the country. In 2019, the United States Library of Congress selected the archives for digital inclusion in a collection of LGBT history. He believes that history exists to be shared, not hoarded, and strives to make his collection accessible to all. Doyle's work has also been honored by numerous awards, such as the Legacy Award from the Greater Houston LGBT Chamber of Commerce in 2023, Trailblazer Award from Texas Conference on Digital Libraries in 2021, a proclamation from Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner during LGBT History Month in October 22, naming it J.D. Doyle Day, from the Houston LGBTQ Political Caucus, given the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019, and Kristen Capps Social Conscious Award in 2021. Legacy Community Health Mint Julep Award in 2023, and Mel Grand Marshal for the 2014 Houston Pride Parade, and the Allen Berube, I was close, prize from the Committee on LGBT History in 2012. And
I told you it was too much to read.
it was a lot, but I felt like, you know what, let's go ahead and mention this in the end. And if you all did not know, this is Mr. Doyle's first memoir. So thank you so much for sharing your history, everything that you experienced in the trip. I clearly was not in the world at that time, but it is very interesting to know what was going on. That was 2 years before my time, but it's interesting to know what was going on prior to the AIDS epidemic. So we thank you so much for sharing your story and not editing your history, because that is your history. And I thank you all for coming in and joining us for this event, as well as those watching online via YouTube and Facebook. I'd also end like mentioning, like, if you would like more information on Houston Library and resources, and as well as our limited edition 120th anniversary library cards, please feel free to visit us online at houstonlibrary.org regarding programs, passport services, and you also can visit many of our HPL locations. At this time, we'd like to thank you once again for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
The book is available on Amazon.com.
And the book is available. I'm sorry about that. The book is available on Amazon.com. Please get your copy. Thank you very much.
It's available. Any bookstore can order it for you.
Yes. Yes. You want this?
I just did.
All right. Well, y'all heard that, right? Okay. Well, thank y'all so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.